morning, everybody. For those of you that don't know, I am the principal here at Yes Prep. My name is Mr. Aguilar, Sandro Aguilar. And so I'm excited. Real quick, I want to start off and say I apologize for those of you that this is our first year teaching. Sometimes in the summer, there's a lot of rehab that's going on, a lot of reshape, a lot of cleaning up of the building, restructuring. And so we're kind of limited on space, but living up to our motto of whatever it takes here at Yes Prep, we're gonna go ahead and move forward with more of our utilizing our music studio here on campus. It's a bit of a, as you can tell, a bit of a more intimate setting, but I'm excited. I think it's gonna elicit a lot of great conversation and discussion when we talk about student thinking for today, right? So what I wanna start thinking about is, I want you guys to incorporate or start assuming or thinking, how can we bring together and constructively create a better lesson for our students, right? I think the harsh reality that a lot of our students are facing is, yeah, we're inheriting them here in 6th grade, but unfortunately their reading level is 1st, 2nd, perhaps even 3rd grade. And so that's a sad truth, the harsh reality of the students that we are working with here at Yes. And so what I want you to start thinking is the realization that not a lot of our students are inheriting the natural comprehension skills and abilities and skill set that we all have over our years of education. Whether that be the great magnet schools we went to, whether that be the undergrad, the rigorous collegiate university skill set or learning styles that we gain, some of us even at the master's level. And so what I want us to think about is, how can we get into the perspective of our young 12, 13-year-old mind and start thinking and realizing what is the truth behind how they can learn better? How can we genuinely think about in our lesson plans where we can constructively create this so that our students have a better understanding in their skill set when they start reading? Because at the end of the day, everything is text-centered and evidence is significant in all their components of learning. And I know what you guys are thinking. Yes, I am an 8th grade English teacher at heart, and a lot of this does pertain to what we're gonna learn in the ELA classroom. But to be honest, there's a lot of you, whether you're science, math, history, that you can incorporate a lot of these skill sets that we're gonna go over today, right? Whether that is giving them a passage of why, if you're the social studies teacher, why in 1776 the American Revolution is such a significant component. Whether you are that mathematics teacher and your equation of 2 + 2 with that formula, I think, or problem solving when you're giving it to your student, I think a lot of these strategies that we're gonna touch base on today could apply within your own classroom. And so I want you guys to really stay engaged. I want everybody to stay as focused as possible, because I think at the end of the day, we are a data-driven campus, and if we sit with this idea of eliciting and responding to student thinking at our forefront when we create our lesson plan, then we're coming into it with thinking of the success of our students, which ultimately is what we want. All right, so before we get going, I want to start a typical teacher in me, right? We're gonna start off with a quick little do first, do now. And so what I want us to do, I gave everybody a handout. If you guys could take about 5 minutes, and the directions are self-explanatory within your handout, take about 5 minutes, read the directions, and then follow the directions that are labeled. And I think every table or every section has a highlighter, a red pin, and a blue pin to kind of just distinguish the difference between one and the other. So take about 5 minutes, and we'll get going from there. So whenever y'all ready, go ahead and start. 3, 2, 1, and then we'll reconvene. Yep, if you haven't yet, I love the way Ms. Cervantes has already started picking up and picked up her blue pen to get going. Go ahead and start utilizing and following direction, please. You guys have about 2 more minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 more minutes to knock out whatever you need to knock out as far as the direction. I think it requires about 3 different ways of reading the passage. It's a little over 30 seconds left. If you guys can start gathering your thoughts, take a few minutes to debrief, come back together and reconvene. Alright, so real quick, right off the back, anybody, actually Ms. Moreno in the back, what did you find was challenging about this dude now?
It was hard to think like someone else.
Exactly, right? And I think sometimes, think about this in the perspective of an educator. When you come in and you're preparing your lesson and you're getting ready to get, inherit the 6th graders that are coming in at 120 in your classroom, it's hard to think or get in the mindset of a little 11-year-old or a 12, 13, 14-year-old. And so I think as educators, we need to be cognizant at the forefront of our mind of what exactly the type of groups and the level of skill set that they have that are coming into our classrooms. And I think that's what makes this idea of like providing evidence and eliciting the way students are thinking is the challenge of thinking outside of the box, right? Not thinking like this 30-year-old teacher that's been in, upper undergraduate level courses and AP this and that in high school at their magnet curriculum. I think it's difficult to separate one from the other, but I think the more we separate that and the more we get in the mindset of our students, I think the better we can elicit that level of thinking that is required for them to gain the skill set that they need to be successful at the higher level of academics, right? Ms. Cervantes, up here in the front, what did you find easy about this activity?
The instructions told us exactly what to do.
Good, right? And I think if you think about it, gives you, when you have a purpose while you read, it makes everything a lot easier. If I were to give you a handout and you were to just read it at the top of your mind, it makes it somewhat challenging if it doesn't specify or if you have no purpose. And with everything in life, the more purposeful you are, the more you have in your forefront exactly, specifically what needs to be accomplished, the more successful that you will be. And so when they tell us in the activity, hey, take the highlighter and highlight everything that a robber would be important for a robber, I think while you are reading, now you are cognizant of what specifically I need to be looking for when I read this passage, as opposed to just taking the time and reading the passage. And I think the more clearer we are when we explain to our students, hey, this is what we're looking for in this passage, I think the more successful, the better, universally, the more success they will have as an individual. And so I just want you to keep this in mind as we go on into today's lesson. There's going to be a lot of strategies that we can implement right away into our lesson plan. And I think there's going to be activities and time at the very end to start incorporating this, so that the first day of school, it's not brand new, it's something you have put in the time and effort needed to reach that level. So let's go ahead and move on with our lesson. These were just sorry. So on that note, can I get a volunteer to go ahead and read the quote up on the board? Mr. Montes?
Expert readers know their purpose for reading and apply strategies unconsciously.
Thank you, ma'am. And again, I want to dive into how we discussed this and how we shared this earlier. Is kids don't come in with this idea in mind. Students are not naturally gifted and have these ideas of how to analyze and how to anecdote and how to create these sort of evaluations in their reading comprehensions. And so at the end of the day, it is our responsibility as their teachers to teach them this skill set, so that as they get older and they gravitate and they get an arsenal of just different skills throughout their years and years of high school and middle school, then they are ready to prepare and lead at the collegiate level. But again, I want to reiterate the reality that it is our responsibility. Whose responsibility? Mr. Montes?
Ours.
Our responsibility to make sure that we, as the leaders of the classroom, are preparing them at the highest level. Because at the end of the day, we want all our students to become expert readers. Because when they become expert readers, then they know the purpose of why they are reading. And then the skill set becomes strategies that unconsciously they start to apply as they get older at a higher level. Because right now, yeah, we can teach them what a metaphor is, and yes, what a simile is, and it's lower level. But you know and I know that as you get older, to those AP classes, to that liberal arts university level courses, that type of level, that skill set, needs a higher level of thinking. And so I want us to truly and genuinely think about this as we go on when we're preparing our lessons. What is my purpose as a teacher to make this my responsibility? Because again, and I keep saying this, but the more it becomes at our forefront and we genuinely buy into it, the more successful our students will become. And so when thinking about this, and this is very fundamental, very basic, in my Psych 101 course back in the heyday, I won't go there because you'll know my truth of how old I am, right? Is this idea of Cole talking about a learning cycle. And so within a learning cycle, he talks about these 4 different quadrants that one must experience in order to truly grasp the theory of learning. And so a lot of it boils down to experience. Then we talk about reiteration and practicing and going over and over so it becomes, again, subconsciously natural. Then we reflect on where we are, and then we teach, right? And so where I want us to focus on in today's activity of eliciting and responding student thinking is looking back on our own experiences, right? What skill sets do you have that you've gained when it comes to reading comprehension, and how can you share that within your classroom? How can you expose that level of skill that you have, and that art and that passion, so that students can buy in and engage in what you're trying to get them to get to? And so that if we're thinking about eliciting and responding to student thinking, the number one thing I consider myself a teacher is, how do I, again, because it is our responsibility as the teacher, prepare for this? And so one flow chart that I would love for you guys to jot down in your handouts and your guided notes that you guys have is this idea that teachers must read and know the text. here's a new flash for you. You can't just walk in and wing it every single day in your classroom. If you're reading an intense novel, like for example, To Kill a Mockingbird, if you never read it, you can't just watch the movie and assume that you can come into the classroom and teach them on this book. Because at the end of the day, you're doing a disservice to yourself, you're doing a disservice to your students, and the level of students learning that we want to grasp and reach will never be reached, right? You're gonna see this acronym of TDQ quite a bit. And what I mean by that is text-dependent questions. Everything that we want our students to do or learn has to be dependent upon the text. There needs to be evidence that verifies what they believe, what their thesis is, what their analysis is. There is actual visual and literature evidence that proves or backs up that statement that they're saying. They can't just say whatever they want to say and not have the actual facts or evidence within the text. At the end of the day, we want our teachers to push our students to always go back to the text. And so for me, one thing that I remember back in the heyday when I taught 8th grade ELA is I made sure that before I stood up in front of my classroom and we dove into what I believe was really harsh theories and concepts, especially with To Kill a Mockingbird, with the racial injustices in America, I made sure that whenever I read, if I knew, hey, on Thursday I was gonna read chapter 5 out loud with the kids, just to kind of pick their brains and see where they wanted, I needed to make sure that before that Thursday came about, I read the text on my own. I specifically specified in the book and annotated where I was gonna pause, what level of questions I was gonna ask that would require them to not only give me a statement, but also to give me evidence within chapter 5 of what we were going to cover. And I think after that, I would also make sure that within my lesson plan, this was scripted, this was pointed out, so that it wasn't just something that I was just winging and making it up on the spot. It was something that as the lesson went on, I truly wanted them to grasp this concept of this is the skill set that required for you to think at a higher level and to understand theories and analysis that you may not have it to begin with. And then once I think a student understands this, then we could just step back and watch them blossom, right? Watch that individual apply those skill sets that you've learned. And to me, it's a beautiful sight to see this child who maybe on Tuesday would have never known that there needed to be some sort of proof or evidence when analyzing and giving statements in literature. And I think this gives them an opportunity to enhance that skill set and be proud of their own thinking, right? I also start to think when I'm, again, reviewing this idea of eliciting and responding student thinking, what are my students doing, right? I think that's a very critical component. And again, if you could jot down in your guided notes, it's a great flow chart to follow, right? Students will read the text. Again, if it is in your lesson plan that today's objective is to identify what the tone and mood is within the literature of chapter 5, then we apply it, then we ask these TDQ questions that requires them to think about what evidence in this chapter that I'm reading provides proof of my statement being ominous and dark, right? And I think once we always support the thinking with evidence from the text, and we give those students that insightfulness, that level of thinking, that level of challenge, then it's no longer I'm just reading to read, right? That student is now given a purpose. That student is now given a priority of what specifically they need to be looking for while they read. And again, if that thinking is grounded in the text, then they're not just reading just to read, right? They are now masterful in their level of comprehension because they're taking ownership of what they're looking for. It's almost like it becomes a scavenger hunt for them as they are diagnosing the literature. And I think once the student does this time after time after time, then it becomes repetition. Then it becomes second nature. And then what we can become proud of is that they can become student learner where they individually are applying these skill sets that we've taught them within the classroom. So now we're gonna go into a few different strategies. All right, everybody. So in the next few minutes here, we're gonna go over a few strategies that I believe we can start incorporating today into our lesson plans. And I think these are strategies quick skills and tips that you can start using now, that personally, I know your DOI, your Dean of Instruction, would be beyond ecstatic, because it's within your lesson plan when they come observe you. But also, I think it's going to be productive to our students if this is actually in your lesson, because it will make you cognizant of when we need to start eliciting the level of thinking of our student. So for starters, the first one is this idea of using images, right? So you want to identify, in a little bit, you're going to partner up. You want to identify with your partner using the image that is provided. I've left a handout each and every one of your tables so that we can partner up. I think there's one per partner, per group, so that y'all can kind of collaborate and bounce ideas with one another. And I think the key in this is to support your answer with evidence. You have an image, and you also have a little storyline that describes what occurred according to the mystery, right? And so what I'm gonna do here is we're analyzing the old famous little picture, right, that every old school teacher uses. Did the individual author actually slip, or did he trip? And so what I want you to do is use your context clues, use the literature that is given to you, use the image to find the evidence of what you determine whether this individual slipped or whether he tripped, right? So if you guys go ahead and gather up with your partners, you guys will have exactly 4 minutes. And if you haven't noticed this, I'm a cross-country coach, so to me it's all about time, it's all about efficiency. So, and saying that, I already wasted 10 seconds, I apologize. Go ahead and take 4 minutes, review the image, and work it out with your partner.
At 5 feet 610 pounds, 5 feet 610 pounds, Queenie was a sight to behold and to clasp. When she tore out the house after a tiff with her husband, Arthur, she went to the country club where there was a party going on. At 5 feet 610 pounds. Who's a fat one? At 5 feet 600. Well, based on the image, I think he fell on his own. What do you think?
I think he tripped and fell because of the way he landed too.
Okay, so he tripped and fell. Our evidence would be the way he landed, and I also said her facial expression.
Take about another 30 seconds and wind down the elaboration part, and then we'll move forward.
What would we put here?
All right, let's get back, and just in the interest of time, let's move forward. But again, this is an activity that you could do within your classroom as a do first, perhaps. It's a way to, for one, I think partnering up and pair share. This idea of like turning to your table partner and collaborating with them. I think it allows one, kids to stay engaged. Two, it holds them accountable to kind of help one another out. For me, a challenge I would even push back as you move on is putting your stronger students next to maybe your lower level thinking students. I think this gives them an opportunity to learn and hear what the answer should look like, and it challenges your smarter students to kind of help push that individual to get better, right? And so again, this is an activity you could do whether through your guided notes, if you're about to start a whole topic on illicit level thinking, it's a great opportunity to do through guided notes or a do first, so to speak. The second strategy that I think we could start implementing and really help out is the idea of using sentence strips. And so what I mean by this, if you could write these bullet points within your guided notes, is the teacher and the students engage in some level of guided reading. So for example, if you know off the bat that you're gonna read chapter 5 of To Kill a Mockingbird, know that the teacher should stop and ask a TDQ, right? Some text determined question of what is gonna happen. And then the teacher should reveal a claim. So for me, like for example, I remember right at the top of my back, I wrote down, and I would write it on the whiteboard, or I'll put it on a slideshow on my PowerPoint, or whatever is more convenient for you. If you have a dot cam and just write it in, I would write or project on the board. The author creates a dark, ominous feeling for the reader throughout chapter 2. So once I basically revealed this claim or this theory, this thesis, this idea, then I would have the students partner up to write the evidence to support that claim. Again, another tactic will partner up to keep them engaged, to challenge them, to push them forward, right? But I think once it's projected on the board, again, the author creates a dark, ominous feeling for the reader throughout chapter 2. I think then and only then it gives the reader a purpose of why they are reading, right? I need to look for exactly why it is dark and ominous. What words did he use? What feeling did the author create? So I think once you have that in mind, it puts it into perspective. So for example, I would literally, if you go back to the activity we just did, right, I would have wrote on there, the Arthur, the young man, the guy that fell down the steps, was tripped by his wife. So I would literally just put that strip on the projection for them, and then I would give them an opportunity to partner up and then write the evidence that of what they believe of why that individual fell. Because I think if students are grounded in their responses with evidence in the text, then again, it pushes them to think further, to analyze the literature the way it's supposed to be analyzed. And again, these are skill sets that naturally could become part of their subconscious to help them grow as learners. So to me, this activity gives them a chance to kind of move around and do as they need to get going. Right? The third tactic that I think could be beneficial is this theory of using whiteboards. So for example, if you can continue to jot this down on your notes, you gotta ask and stop and ask the students a text-dependent question. So to me, small groups are essential when creating these sort of level of activities. So for me, I would have them write a claim on the board. So for example, I would ask the students working in small groups to write their own claim. I would write on the board, how does the author describe the racial injustice in America To Kill a Mockingbird? So once I ask that text-dependent question and I make it universal throughout the entire class, I would partner them up in groups of 3 or 4, no more than 3 or 4, because then as you know, it gets a little crazy, right? You have too many inconsistencies of being held accountable. And I would have each group write on a sheet of paper or on a whiteboard or however create whatever resources you have in your classroom. And I would have them write the answer to the question, how does the author describe the racial injustice in America throughout To Kill a Mockingbird? Once that individual or that group creates that statement, I would then, as a teacher, I would set a timer and I would have those students rotate from station to station. Because students, and then in those statements, they can kind of back up that claim and provide the evidence needed for that statement. And so I think, to me, it gives them an opportunity to elaborate together. It gives them an opportunity to find the text and the evidence needed for that text. And I think it gives them an opportunity to just kind of see the different theories and the different ideas within their own classroom. And I would even push those students. Don't let one individual answer them at every station, right? Really hone in and challenge them to go around and hold each person accountable in their group so that they can have a sufficient answer, a sufficient amount of participation, and everybody's bouncing ideas off one another and learning as much as possible. Right? So again, students rotate from station to station and they must have their text with them. So it is crucial and imperative, it is significant for them to have their literature with them for that day. And I think as they go on and they read those statements, I think what's beautiful about it is when they go back and they read the different ideas that everyone in the classroom has, I think challenges them further to continue to grow as a learner, continue to grow as a student, to grasp this higher level of thinking when they're eliciting this sort of comprehension. So the fourth strategy, and to me this is one of my favorites, because the reality of it all is that a lot of our kids, they're addicted to social media. And so for me, if you could engage that student by providing some level of maybe thinking or analyzing or comparing to social media, then the activity automatically becomes interesting to them. It all of a sudden becomes so engaging for them to want to learn the material that you have for the day. So for example, right, students will have to respond to that TDQ, that text dependent question, and it gives them an opportunity to provide the evidence. So, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm horrible at social media, I don't have a Facebook, but if you were to put on there, cite the textual evidence that most strongly supports an analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. So the TDQ question in this activity is, how does Adam feel after his parents' divorce? So now that you ask this question, now the student needs to analyze, well, what evidence do I have that supports what I believe, right? When Adam's parents divorced, he lost his mother and father. They had ceased to exist. So student then elaborates by updating their Facebook status, right? Giving a different update, which I know some of you all do, don't act like you don't do it on Facebook, and actually updating what specifically Adam is going through. If Facebook is not your thing, or a lot of students don't like, maybe the activity would be to actually provide or update their Instagram page, right? Actually give something on the bottom, hashtag disappointed, hashtag really sad, hashtag heartbroken, just for them to provide their evidence of when Adam's parents divorced, he lost his mother and they had ceased to exist, of how sad this individual is. And you can make this in an introductory level when you're hooking them, pretty basic and fundamental, the way I did in this activities here. And then when you push this further into the actual analysis of the literature and the novel that you're reading in class, then you can push that level of thinking a lot harder by asking, higher level thinking questions, right? And I don't know if maybe if you're doing this 3-4 years from now, Instagram and Facebook maybe disappears, but maybe at that point Snapchat, you have them create their own story, right? And have them draw or design. And these are just different levels of thinking that challenge them further, as opposed to just doing it through a text and analysis. My fifth strategy that I have, and again, I think technology is critical with these the generation that we're currently teaching. I think the more technology that we offer in our classroom, the more social media. The theory or the idea of using technology is significant to the generation that we're currently working with. And so one app that I would really encourage you all to download and utilize in your classroom is Plickers. And so Plickers, what it is basically a kind of like a card system where you can put on their text-dependent questions or claims or statements, and you can have the students, every student will have their individual card, kind of like this, where all the answers are either A, B, C, or D. And if you were to ask that claim or statement and you were to put, for example, cite the textual evidence that mostly strongly supports an analysis of what the text says, and you put A is this, B is this, C is this, then the student could literally, without feeling ashamed or singled out or anything of that sort, could put up their card and what letter they're in, and you as the teacher can kind of scan the room to see the responses. And it's kind of, to me, I love to utilize this in two parts of the lesson. Either A, the guided notes, because it allows them to apply individually what we just learned in today's class. And then selfishly, I also love to do it at the end of the class during what I call their exit tickets. So, and that's just for me to see whether or not quick analysis, quick survey of who mastered the objective today versus who may be the individual that I need to follow up the next time we have work time in the classroom. So again, the app is called Plickers. That's the symbol for it. I highly recommend, encourage you to download it either today, tomorrow, and challenge yourself to use it in a few of your classrooms in the upcoming school year. So with that being said, if we go back to this idea of the learning cycle, everything that we've talked about, these strategies, comes here, right? The knowledge through our experience. But what's significant is if you, the teacher, don't practice more this idea of truly spending time within your lesson plan and truly writing and scripting when you're going to elicit this level of higher level thinking, the reality is it's never going to happen. And so I'm going to challenge you all, and I would love for you all and give you guys time today, right, to go ahead and practice and kind of go over a little bit in an actual lesson, upcoming lesson plan that you have. And I hope you read through the email where we talked about bringing a lesson plan. I'm glad a lot of y'all brought your laptops to be able to do that. And so in this section, I want you to find or select a section in your actual lesson plan of when you're going to elicit and focus on the eliciting and the responding to the student's thinking. And so in the interest of time, normally we'd give y'all 10 minutes, but just because I want to honor your guys' lesson or time in today's intervention, in today's workshops, I want to actually just give y'all about 4 to 5 minutes. And I'm going to start the timer, but really it's going to be, it says 10, but it's going to be 4 to 5. And go ahead and work on your own and start thinking what section, choose a section, and then we'll get back. And at the end, I would really love to hear from one of you. 4 to 5 minutes. Go ahead, guys. Take about another minute and a half, and then we'll get going. Hopefully one brave soul did some of the pre-work at home and would be willing to share their insight on how they went about it. All right, about 30 more seconds, then we'll get going. Really appreciate your thoughtfulness. I'm really excited to hear some of your input in a little bit here. All right. Do I have anybody in particular that can come and rehearse real quick their lesson? Cervantes? Yeah, here we go. There's always one brave one. So, Mr. Cervantes, if you can, when you come up, if you can real quick before you actually start your lesson, if you could just explain to us your thought process, what strategies you actually used, and then get going with the lesson. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. This is your media here?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this here. We have a seat. Oh, I missed it wrong.
Okay, so can I use the back arrow? Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the ones that I'm going to incorporate in my lesson, it's going to be, instead of using an image, I have a video prepared for you guys so that you guys can see it, and then I'm also going to incorporate using sentence strips. So what I will be doing today is I will be showing you a video. It's a video that we all probably have seen. So one of the sentence stems that I want you guys to use when you turn and talk to your partner will be, I believe the purpose of this video is. So I have the video here. The video is called The Turtle and the Hare, which we're all familiar with. And I'm gonna go ahead and say, I'm gonna go ahead and reveal the claim that I got. So remember that he presented, he said the teacher reveals a claim. So the one that I believe, and we all can be different, I don't want it to be the same as mine. I believe the purpose of this video is to do not underestimate what someone else can do. So that's my claim. So I'm gonna go ahead and play the video. So we'll go ahead and stop it there. We kind of get the idea. So what I want you to do is I'm going to give you a couple of minutes for you to turn and talk to your neighbor, someone that you have at your table, and I want you to use this. Remember, we're trying to get our students to use these sentence strips. So I believe the purpose of this video is to. So I want you to turn and talk. I will give you about 30 seconds.
Well, I would say the evidence that I saw was on her theory of not underestimating is basically he crossed the finish line, but yet the tortoise or the turtle had already won, right? Just given their phone calls. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so if you see here, when we use the sentence strips, I gave you mine, which is, I believe the purpose of this video is do not underestimate what someone else can do. So that, I have my claim there. So now we have our students provided. So they provided, Mr. Aguilar provided evidence by saying, hey, you know what, based on the conversations that they were having, obviously the turtle had already reached the finish line. So we would have our kids do that, and it's just like you mentioned, we would follow this, and that way we would have our kids comprehend, and most importantly, be able to provide us evidence. And
Awesome.
that'd be it.
Hey, thank you. Can I get a round of applause from the entire classroom? All two amazing people here. Alright, so right out the back, thank you, Mr. Montes, for being the brave soul to come up and share with that insight. And so this concludes our activity or our workshop on eliciting higher level of thinking and purposeful reading comprehension skills. And so I'm excited for the school year coming up. I'm excited to push in and see and observe all the greatness that's going in around our campus. And so what I challenge you all is that this not becomes a workshop that we just see right here and never think about it ever again. My challenge to everybody in this room is that at one point you actually inherit, you actually implement, because at the end of the day, I know we're all in here for the benefit and the betterment of our kids. And so I think the more we apply this higher level of thinking, the more we're grounded in our foundation of evidence and text-based comprehension reading, whether that is you being an ELA teacher, whether that's you teaching calculus, whether that's you teaching intro to biology, I think the better off our kids will be in the long run. And I think when we think about our mission of every kid on our campus attending a high school or 4-year college or university and being prepared to lead, I think this comes down to the basic fundamentals of it all, and for them to grasp and learn that skill set, right? Thank you so much for your attention and your time, and I appreciate everything. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your workshop.